I guess we can watch the car video, you know. When the WRC met its match, The Era of the Kit Car, by Jaco Motors and the Lub. Okay.
When people think of rallying in the 1990s, their first thoughts are likely that of Subaru, Lancia, Mitsubishi, Toyota and the like, all being piloted by legends like Colin McRae, Carlos Sainz, Juha Kankkunen and Tommi Mäkinen. And while yes, these thoughts pertain to an especially great and, in my opinion, the greatest era in the history of the top level of the WRC, there was also an equally legendary form of the sport taking place in the shadow of these four-wheel drive monsters. Today, let's take a deep dive into the long gone but never forgotten FIA 2-litre World Rally Cup.
2-litre? Lot of smaller cars, huh? Okay, let's learn.
The 2-litre Cup found its beginnings back in the early 1990s. The WRC was still reeling from the sudden abandonment of the Group B rule set of the WRC and the switch to the slower Group A in 1987. While rallying as a sport was still immensely popular, there was a likely perception at the time that these new Group A rally cars were simply inferior to the Group B predecessors. And yes, while in many technical ways that may be true, they were still 300 horsepower race-ready monsters at their core. Still, the FIA likely wanted to branch out into new avenues to try and recapture that truly immense popularity of rally sport that the mid-1980s was able to provide. So the idea was devised to create a support class for the WRC, essentially a championship race at the same events but with lower spec cars to bolster the overall presence of the sport. And so the FIA would implement the Group A rule set for a lower class of car. Engine size was limited to 2 litres and they had to be naturally aspirated, and most importantly, front wheel drive. This was in stark contrast to the top dog WRC cars, despite them also being powered by 2-litre engines.
Like right away, my first thought is why though? Like I'm sure this is gonna turn out that it was pretty entertaining, but you know, when you put it like this, it doesn't sound very appealing. Just like a lower class with lower vehicle with, you know, more limitation and less power and all that. So, like, you know, if you're a fan and you're being told that, it doesn't sound very interesting.
They were turbocharged and 4-wheel drive. Of course, with the majority of the WRC calendar taking place on off-road surfaces, the 4-wheel drive versus 2-wheel drive debate was pretty much non-existent. There would be no way these smaller cars could keep up with their more powerful brethren. They would be known as the F2 cars. 2-litre championships had been raced as far back as the 1970s, but now it would be an official FIA championship to run alongside the primary World Rally Championship. In its original form, it would be known as the FIA Cup for manufacturers of touring cars, a name that rarely rolls off the tongue. And despite this championship being of a lower class and, let's face it, prestige than the WRC, there was no shortage of manufacturers taking part, even in its first year, which was 1993.
Interesting.
In total, 14 race teams would go for the inaugural 2-litre title. Standouts from this early period include Skoda with their favourite 136L, notable for having just a 1.3-litre engine, the iconic Renault Clio Williams, and Lada even showed up with a rally-spec version of their Samara. For the 1993 championship, all rounds from that year's WRC would be raced for the 2-litre Cup, with the omissions of the Safari Rally and Rally Australia, leaving 11 rounds. But by the end it would actually be General Motors, specifically their European branch, that would take victory in 1993, with a very dominant 7 victories out of 11 rounds, giving them a 20-point advantage. Most of these wins were thanks to the Opel Astra GSI 16 valve, being piloted by soon-to-be WRC driver Bruno Thierry,
extremely civilian car looking,
making around 220 horsepower. The 7th victory was thanks to the Vauxhall version, which fittingly won the final round in Britain. Skoda, Lada and Renault Argentina with the clunky 18 GTX would also take victories. With a successful first season under its belt, the 2-litre Cup soldiered on into 1994. That year saw a round rotation system implemented into the WRC, and of the 8 rounds raced in the 2-litre Cup this year, Sweden, Australia and Spain were exclusively 2-litre Cup events, not seen in the main championship. Again, a solid number of manufacturers would have a team competing. Ford would make their debut with the Escort RS 2000, and other brands like Nissan with their Sunny GTI would begin to put more focus on the championship. Skoda would be the ones to take victory this year in the mere 1.3 litre powered favourite. Unlike 1993, it wasn't as dominant a performance as General Motors, with the likes of Nissan, Renault and Ford all
It is kind of fun to seeing this little, like,
the most notable outcome,
like this kind of car to me, from the look itself, is the idea of, like, the kind of old car that the grandpa or grandma is driving and they got back in the 80s, 90s. That's what I've seen them mostly, this kind of a very small box car, so that's kind of the option I get. Obviously at the time, maybe that's not what they look like, right? So they were new and fresh, but, by these days or even 10 years ago or more, that's the impression. So it's kind of cool seeing them, like, just absolutely zoom onto gravel and slide and, go crazy. It's kind of cool.
1994 would be a change to the rules. Up to this point, the cars racing in the 2-litre Cup were simply road cars modified for competition. Towards the end of the season, the FIA modified the rules to allow kit cars to compete. Essentially, these were F2 cars, but much more modification was permitted than before. They would retain the overall chassis of the road car, but they could then fit purpose-built lightweight body panels. The greatest advantage of this was the ability to widen the body, allowing for a much wider track width, hence improved handling. Manufacturers now had the freedom to build some very specialised cars.
Interesting.
1995 therefore would see the roster of cars begin to see a shift. Peugeot swooped in and debuted their ever iconic 306 Maxi with an engine that Peugeot Sport modified so it could rev to well over 10,000.
I was gonna say, like, kind of stupid thoughts. I have no idea and logical thinking of engineering, but, if you can build whatever you want, why couldn't you have a wheel in the middle of the car? Have a fifth wheel, like, in the middle, you know what I mean? Wouldn't that help in some way? Like, having, some propulsion power from, like, the middle itself? No? Is that stupid? Probably.
RPM. Renault would introduce a more race-orientated entrant with the Clio Maxi, and
That's
Spanish
cool.
manufacturer Seat would introduce their 16-valve Ibiza GTI. By now, there really wasn't one dominant team or car like in the earlier years. The kit car regulations were still being explored, and of the 10 total rounds in this year's championship, 7 manufacturers would see victory. Peugeot would be the team to take the championship this year despite just one win under their belts, with Renault and Skoda flanking them on the podium.
I'm actually surprised Peugeot and Renault are doing so well. I mean, they're basically the 2 biggest French car brands. And, they're seen fairly good in France, though I've seen that overseas, I think people, don't really like French car brands, right? But I'm actually surprised that, they're doing so well against Japanese car brand or US car brand and all that, I'm surprised. Yeah. I had a Peugeot myself.
Even in just its first full year, the kit car regulations were so successful out of the gate that the 2-litre manufacturers outnumbered the WRC manufacturers 2-1. "1996 saw further additions to the kit car fleet. Renault, following the introduction of the Clio Maxi the year before, introduced the Megane Maxi, and Ford introduced the Escort Maxi. It seems that Renault's introduction of their Megane was a solid one, with the team winning 3 events outright this year. However, it would be Seat that won the championship, despite winning just 1 round, beating Renault to the top by just 7 points, who beat Skoda to second by just a single point. The roster of drivers also began to solidify around this time too, with names such as Filip Bugalski, Jesus Perez and Gilles Panizzi all seeing solid amounts of success in the F2 class.
7.
After a few years of good competition, 1997 would see the championship explode in popularity. Nissan re-established their position within the ranks with both the Micra and Almera GTI kit cars, Skoda replaced the aging Felicia with the Octavia kit car, Hyundai introduced their Coupe kit car, and both Peugeot and Citroën would opt to introduce smaller and lower powered alternatives in the 106 Maxi and the Saxo kit car respectively. Even so, Seat would duplicate their success in 1996 with another championship victory in 1997, with an extremely impressive 70-point lead over Skoda. However, the biggest news this year came at Rally Catalunya, when tarmac expert Gilles Panizzi was able to claim an outright 3rd position. Just to be clear, this isn't just 3rd in the F2 category, but 3rd over all categories. Apart from 2 drivers, Panizzi had beaten every other WRC entrant in his lower class Peugeot 306. He would go on to repeat this feat in the following round at the Tour de Corse. This was unexpected to say the least. The WRC cars should be unchallenged on a rally stage, yet here's a plucky F2 car sitting among their ranks.
I mean, it's as always, like, is it the car or is it the driver? I mean, I'm sure it's a combination of both, but you know.
Begs the question, with the likes of Peugeot and Renault beginning to challenge the WRC cars on certain rallies, how was Seat still able to claim the 2-litre championship? Well, essentially the cars were built for different purposes. While Seat designed their Ibiza kit car with the intention of performing consistently across the entire F2-litre championship, being both adept on tarmac and gravel, the French manufacturers developed their kit cars with the national championships in mind, in particular the French Rally Championship, which was an all-tarmac championship. So while the 306 Clio and Megane absolutely smoked any 2-wheel drive competition on tarmac, on off-road rallies they performed much worse. This extremely purpose-built aspect of the French kit cars would soon prove to become much more important than initially thought.
I'm born, I'm alive.
The ever-growing capabilities of the kit cars became even more apparent at the 1998 running of the Tour de Corse. While Colin McRae was able to triumph in his Impreza, Francois Delacour finished in 2nd place, rolling across the line just 27 seconds after the Scot. The Impreza was undeniably a more capable car all around than Delacour's 306 Maxi, yet the results showed that on tarmac the advantage might not be so set in stone. With competitive times also given at the Catalunya and San Remo rallies, it was clear that it was only going to be a matter of time until the apple cart would be upset. Aside from this, the rest of the 1998 2-litre season was business as usual. Seat were able to claim their hat-trick this year, with a fairly uncontested spot at the top of the leaderboard. Despite very little rally experience prior to the 2-litre championship, the relative newbies had somehow managed to win 3 years in a row. This success convinced them to challenge for the main WRC championship, and they would debut their Cordoba WRC at the 1998 Rally Finland, and 1998 would be their final year in competition in the 2-litre category. Despite the 1998 2-litre Cup being fairly uneventful, this was in stark contrast to the main WRC championship that year. To find out why that was, check out this 1998 WRC recap video I helped to produce with The Rub, link in the description.
Cool.
And that brings us to 1999. This would prove to be simultaneously the best and worst year for the 2-litre Cup. By now it had become rather obvious that despite these kit cars being fairly lackluster on dirt and snow compared to their WRC counterparts, on tarmac with their much lighter weight and two-wheel drive system, they were the ones to look out for. However, up to this point it had never really been much of a problem. Sure, the close call at the 1998 Tour de Corse had turned some heads, but the WRC cars were always able to come out on top. And then Citroën came along and decided to cause some trouble. Following the debut of their Zara kit car in 1998, the French team had somehow managed an outright triumph in the French Rally Championship.
I guess I forgot about Citroën, yeah. Peugeot, Renault and Citroën are like the three big brands in France, yeah. Majority of the cars will be that. So. Yeah.
That year. For 1999, they had their eyes set on the World Championship. Following a rather standard first 4 rounds, with Renault proving to be the most dominant brand with their Megane Maxi, came round 5, Catalonia. This was one of the championship's historic staples, of course taking place entirely on tarmac. The Citroën team would select Philippe Bugalski and Jesus Perez to head up their attack. And to the absolute shock of everybody, Bugalski would win, not just in the F2 class, but overall. World-class WRC drivers like Didier Auriol, Tommy Mäkinen and Richard Burns had somehow been conquered by two-wheel drive. A whole decade had passed since a two-wheel drive car had managed to win a WRC event when a Renault 5 won the 1989 Ivory Coast Rally, and one had managed to once again. Everyone was stunned, but it was about to get even more incredible. Round 6, the Tour de Corse, once again another full-on asphalt event. And you can probably sense where this is going. Bugalski would do it again, rolling across the finish line in a confident first position. To add to the success, his Citroën teammate Perez would manage to wrangle second. 2 spots on the podium were taken up by the kit cars. Citroën hadn't even bothered to race in the other rounds this season, yet had managed to claim a third of the season's victories so far. It was madness to say the least. And it was fair to say that there were a lot of unhappy people and teams. How far would it go before the FIA put a stop to it? Sure, a kit car could never outright win or even podium in the championship standings unless there were some extreme circumstances playing in their favour. But the mere fact that these 4-wheel drive 300 horsepower monsters were being beaten by the much less impressive kit cars wasn't exactly a good look.
I guess it wasn't, but now it's already happened, so like, if you shut it down because of that, it seems pretty stupid, huh? I don't know.
So let's put a pin in that for a moment. Outside of the WRC upsets, the F2 category chugged along as usual. Despite Citroën winning 2 WRC events, the fact they weren't bothering to contest the rest of the rounds in the 2-litre Cup put them out of title contention. Instead, it would be fellow French manufacturer Renault that would take the victory, though Hyundai would get scarily close with just a 7-point difference between the two teams, despite Hyundai's coupe kit car having a noticeable problem with reliability and at times power. The only other manufacturer with any championship contention was Volkswagen, who weren't even classified due to them not homologating their Golf GTI kit car at the start of the season. A small-scale competition to say the least. This would, rather inevitably, prove to be the final season of the F2 Cup. The upsets at Catalonia and Corsica forced the FIA to rewrite the rule set and reclassify the cars that could compete in these lower classes. Plus, with the slow drop in manufacturers taking part and the rising costs, it was inevitable that the kit car would meet its end. The F2 category would quickly find itself replaced. This started in 2000 with the aptly named Super 2000 class in the Production World Rally Championship, and that was followed in 2001 by the Super 1600 class of the Junior World Rally Championship.
So still like equivalent.
Despite the F2 category being long gone by now, it really did pave a solid path for where the WRC is today. Sure, the WRC cars of the time were more iconic and are still remembered by most if not all fans of the sport, but these little front-wheel drive monsters provided a really unique and exciting alternative form of action for spectators. By the end of its run, the kit cars were more like purebred circuit racers than lower-class rally cars. You may disagree with that sentiment, but the fact that they were so dominant on the tarmac events is certainly no fluke. Additionally, the class would create an environment that both drivers and manufacturers alike would use as a springboard that directly led to some outstanding careers later down the line. Brands you'd never really associate with rallying, such as Honda and Daewoo, saw the lower cost entry points of F2 as a great way to find a start in the sport. Both Citroën and Peugeot saw massive success competing with kit cars, which would lead to them having successful outings in the main WRC in the 2000s, with Peugeot going on to win 3 constructors' titles, and Citroën going on to win an astonishing 8.
Okay.
Drivers such as Gilles Panizzi, Harry Rovanpera and of course Sebastian Loeb would find their starts in the class and would go on to see equal success in the WRC, Loeb likely being one of the biggest success stories in motorsporting history. David versus Goliath is probably an overused phrase to describe another story, but I think when the kit cars, even just for a moment, were able to triumph over the WRC cars, well, let's just say that David certainly knows how to drive a kit car. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If I missed anything...
Very interesting. I mean, I'm guessing again, like, there's equivalent to that today. Even if it's not exactly the same rules and restriction, but like a smaller league for smaller cars with a smaller engine and all that, right? I'm guessing there must be an equivalent. I enjoyed it. As always, history of sports is something I enjoy. You know, even if I don't actually watch the sport myself, it's a good dose of history. Good dose of history.